Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the book of Eov, the Sefer Eov, book of Job. We are about to read chapter 14. In chapter 13, Eov had just told his friends in a response to their rebuke of him, he had told them that not only does nature, but I see God's justice. I see what happens in the real world, and you should see what happens in the real world too. And then he ended it by begging them, just stay and listen to me. Pay attention to what I'm saying, and then maybe you will understand. So what is he saying? And that is what he's going to start saying in 14. What lesson do I want you to learn? This is what I'm saying. Be careful. Listen to me carefully, Eov says. Adam Yelud Isha. The human being. Eov is, you get the sense here that he's speaking to the audience. As if this was some kind of a play, speaking to the audience and to God, as opposed to directly addressing his friends. But of course, as we know, this is part of his response to them. Adam Yelud Isha, man is just born of a woman. In other words, a man is just born of a human being. Kitzar Yamim, he has short days. Usiva Rogez, and he has plenty of pain, plenty of suffering in his life. Kitzitz Yatzava Yimal, just like a blossom, he comes out and flowers and then suddenly withers away and falls off. Vayivrach, and he runs away or vanishes or disappears. Katzel, just like shade, like a shadow. Velo Yamod, he has no permanence. He doesn't stay. And then he turns to God and says in verse 3, Afal zepokachta inecha, you God, even on this little nothing of a human being, you pay attention. You look at me and pay attention to me. Often, this pakachta inecha, if you look in other words of the other prophets, such as for example, in Jeremiah and Yirmiyahu, chapter 32, where he says, Asher einecha pikuchos al kol darchei b'nei adam, that God, you pay attention, your eyes are open to. In other words, you pay attention to punish. And in Zechariah, we also see this language used. So pakachta inacha is not just God, you pay attention to me, but you pay attention and you're careful to punish me for every little thing. V'yosi savi b'mishpati mach, and you're bringing me, this little nobody, you're bringing me to judgment in front of you, God. Like, what's this? Mi yitain tahar mitamei. Who is it in this world who can make out of something impure something pure, right? Lo echad, no human being can do that. In other words, every human being has flaws. Everyone has something. And if you're going to be so careful to punish for every little thing, remember the friends told Eov, every human being is flawed. So therefore you must deserve the punishment. Eov is saying, whatever little flaws I may have certainly do not warrant the kind of suffering that I'm going through. We cannot explain why. So, and if this is the kind of justice, therefore Eov is challenging God and saying, is this the kind of justice that you are meting out? You're expecting me to be so perfectly perfect that I don't even make a tiniest mistake, and the tiniest mistake warrants such terrible punishment. Im charutzim yamav, this is verse 5. If the person's days are set in a specific number, if there is a certain amount of days that a person has, mispar chodoshav bitach, who knows the month that he will live? You're the one that knows. Chukav asisa, you're the ones that established the rules by which human beings live. Velo yavor, and he can't pass those rules. He can't transgress those rules. It's not in our power. If God says human beings is going to live this long, that's how it goes. Our life in this world is ruled by you. She'eme Allah v'yechdal. You know, God, just forget, stop paying attention to me. Turn away from him. He's speaking about himself in second person, in third person. V'yechdal, and just leave him alone. Ad yirtzek yisachir yamo, until he's finished up his time like a worker. Let him do it. Let me do my work. Let me be on this world for the short period of time you put me here, and leave me alone. Don't make me suffer so much. He says, Ki yesh la'etz tikva, human beings are even worse than trees, because a tree at least has hope. Imi kares, if you chop it down, v'yod yachlif, it will grow more out of the stump. You leave it alone, the tree can still grow. V'yonaktolo sechdol. It's the roots are still alive. It can still grow new branches. Im yaskin ba'aretz sharasho. If its roots are very old in the ground, uve'afar yamuskizo, and its stump dies in the dirt. Mereach mayim yafriach. In other words, the dirt, because it dries up. As soon as you give it a little water, it'll start flowering again. And it'll start bringing out a new tree, just like a new sapling, a new young tree. That's a tree. Even if it looks dead, if it's going down, but it still has some life in there. V'gever, but a human being, yamus v'yachlosh, he will die and he will become weakened. V'yigva adam v'yayo, a person will then die and he will be gone. That's it. He's gone. That's it. That's the end. So this little person who has this little amount of time, now, this is very important because we're going to see in these next few verses what Eov is talking about. He's talking about the life we have in this world, the life we have that is ruled by nature. The life we have that is ruled by nature has an end. It ends when our life is over and we go into the ground, and that's the end. It's over. This might sound like, and it's sometimes considered a refutation of the idea of Tchiyat HaMesim. But it's actually not that. What it actually is we'll find soon, is an explanation of what Eov's idea of Tchiyat HaMesim is. Tchiyat HaMesim means the resurrection of the dead. What Eov is saying is the rules and laws that govern the nature within which we live and function. The human life is over and it ends and it's gone. Azlu mayim miniyam. Water is gone from the sea. Now over here, most translate this yam here, the word as sea, which then asks, what does it mean the water is gone from the sea? The sea never loses water. So there's different explanations. I think yam here is referring to the same thing as we find in the book of Kings, where we talk about the yam shel Shlomo, the sea of Solomon, which we know was a large vat, like a large bowl, which kept water in the so any collection of water was called a yam. So azlu mayim min yam is just Eov saying the water is gone when this sea here dries up and the water is gone. That's like a human life over. V'nahari yachravi aveich. It's like a river that dries up and becomes parched. Right? That's what a human being is like. V'ish shochav v'lo yakum, and a man, human being, will lie down and pass away, and he will never get up again. Ad bilti shamayim, until there no longer is heavens. Lo yakitzu, he will not wake up, which means and is understood to mean, and I agree with Malbim on this. And Malbim says al bilti shamayim, meaning the rules, the laws of shamayim va'aretz, from the laws of Genesis, right? In other words, the laws of nature. Until the laws of nature are suspended, the human being is gone. Remember, what Eov here is lamenting is the suffering he has in this life, the suffering that human beings undergo in this life. And what he's asking God and what he's complaining about and what he's crying about is, I don't understand what's the point of all this. Maybe after the laws of nature are suspended, there might be some sort of eternal life, but until then, it's over. In other words, in the world in which we function, what's the point? V'lo ye'oru mishanasam. During the world, while the laws of nature are in effect, they will never wake up from their sleep. So this is actually Eov stating that he does believe in Tchiyat HaMesim, in the resurrection, but a very different type of resurrection than some people simplistically think, that everyone's going to get up and walk around just like they are today. Although there are some people that understand it that way. But what Eov is saying is exactly like Maimonides teaches us, that it's not an understanding of of us getting up and exactly like in the form we are now. It is the time when the laws of nature are completely different, when the laws of nature are gone. In other words, in the future time, according to Maimonides, the laws of nature remain exactly the same. But the eternity that we attain is not an eternity that we attain within this world. however you understand that eternity. And that's what Eov is saying. So if that's the case, why am I living through this? Why am I suffering through this if it's just going to be over? If only God would just hide me away in the Sheol, in the grave, right? Hide me away. Hide me there until you're not angry anymore, right? Tashisli. And then you can tashisli chok, set for me a time, and then you can remember me and take me out. In other words, when you're done with this anger business, God, then take me out of hide me in hell, right, Sheol, or hide me under the ground, right, and remember me when it's time. Like, I don't want to go through this. Im yamus gever, if this is he's saying im yamus gever hayichyeh, right? If a man will die, will he ever, in other words, not so much if, but when a man dies, hayichyeh, will he ever wake up? Will he ever become alive? And remember, this is so careful. You have to understand what he's saying. If a human being, a gever, ruled by the laws of nature, ruled by the laws of Teva, that he's discussing, that Eov was lamenting before, did he ever get up? No, he doesn't. Kol yemei tzivai. So therefore, all of the days of my time, my term, tzivai here means a term of service. We've had that several chapters ago, this language of like a term of military service, tzava, right? But here it's in reference to the term of service, all the days of my term of service. And you can imagine why Eov is calling his life a term of service, because it's not too pleasant. So all the days of my term of service, ayachel. Now, ayachel by many of the commentaries is translated as I will wait. I think it means here ayachel from a language of I will hope, right? As we see often, sometimes the word, that shorish, that root means to hope in Hebrew. So kol yimei tzvai, all my days, I am going to hope for what? Ad bo chalifasi, until the next one, whoever's taking my place should come. In other words, I'm always waiting for me to be out of here, right? So like, what's the point? Remember, Eov was saying, what's the point of living this life if all of my days I'm just living and hoping for this to be over so someone else could come and take my place and I could go off to the next world. Tikravi anochi eneka. And then he begs God. And we see how this relationship with God is still a relationship of love, but and desire to be close with him. But on the other hand, also, but to understand, like, why am I living through this suffering? What Eov wants is just understanding. What he's begging for is to understand. And this is so important because he's addressing his friends who don't get this. They don't understand this. They think that by Eov complaining, by Eov asking these questions, by Eov crying out his frustrations, they think that he's blaspheming God. But he's not doing that at all. What he's asking for is a relationship, and he's asking for the understanding. He's asking for answers. Eventually, he'll get an answer from God. But we're going to save that for the end. That's not going to be for another, 20 some odd chapters. But he'll get one. But the answer is not going to be, it's not going to be exactly what he wants, because we still won't know and understand God. But tikravi anochi eneka, he says to God, call out and I will answer you. Right? In other words, when call to me, I will talk to you. I'll answer you. I want to speak with you, God. I want a relationship. L'maaseh yadecha tichsof, I want you, God, to desire and to pay attention to your creation. In other words, I just begged you to leave me alone. I started this chapter begging you to leave me alone, but now I'm begging you, no, don't leave me alone in the sense that I don't want a relationship with you. Don't leave me alone. Come to me. Look towards me. Call to me. I will answer you. It says, I want to have a relationship. I want to talk with you. I just don't want you to punish me in such a way that I don't understand. Ki atot adai tispar, right? Because if you really cared and you really had a relationship with me, then you wouldn't go counting out every single one of my footsteps, right? In other words, you wouldn't be so exacting with me for every little mistake caused me so much suffering. Lo tishmar al chatasi, you wouldn't pay so much attention to whatever mistakes I made in the past and keep worrying about those mistakes and then punishing me for them, right? Because if we have this relationship of love, then you understand the circumstances under which I made those mistakes. You'll have more patience with me. Chosum bitzror pishi. If you had this relationship with me, then my sins would be closed up in a little package. You'd put them away in your purse and close it up. Vatitpol alavoni, and you would coat over. You would tapel. Here is tet, with the tet is to smear, like cover it over with a seal. Vu'ulam har nofel yibol, right? However, what do we find in this world? We find har nofel, mountains collapse and wither away. V'tsuri etakmi mukomo. We find rocks getting torn away from their places. So this har nofel is presumably, I mean, there's different ways to understand this. The way I understand it means, I'm begging for this relationship. I want to have a relationship of love with you, a relationship of patience, a relationship of kindness. But instead, what do we have? We have a world where people that are great and high, like myself, Eov was once upon a time in his life, turn into a nothing. We wither away, and big rocks. A tzur means a rock, but it means like a large monumental rock, right, is getting torn out of its place. Avonim shochaku mayim, right? Stones are being absorbed away and washed away by the water. Tishtof seficheha afar oretz. You wash the newly grown crops. There's different ways to understand this word seficheha. I'm understanding it from sefichim, which usually means the seedlings. So the small little plants are getting washed away into the dirt of the land. V'tikvat enosh ha'avadato, and any hope that human beings have, any hope we have to have a decent life here, ha'avadato, you are ruining. You're just washing it all away. That's what we haven't. That's what I have instead. That's what human beings live through instead. Eov is wishing that his friends would listen and understand. I'm not rejecting God. I want God. I want a relationship with God. I want to talk to him. I just don't want this life of suffering that's for no reason. This life of suffering that makes no sense. I was a good person. God himself said I was a good person, but yet he still makes me suffer this much. Verse 20, Titkefehu lanetzach vayahaloch. What do you do, God, to human beings? You overpower him forever, right? In other words, because we're nothing to you. We can't fight against you, obviously. Your power is so much mightier. You just overpower him by aloch, and then he just goes until he's done. Mishanef onav, he changes his face. There's different ways to understand. I understand this to mean mishanef onav. He started off with such hope, and now he just becomes sad. Vatashalacheu, and then you send him away. Yichbedu vanav lo yedai. You send him away to the grave so fast that his children may achieve high places, and he won't even know. In other words, his life is so short. So many times, he doesn't even get a chance to see his children be successful. V'yitzaru, his children may have pain, or it could mean they are humbled. V'lo yavin lamo, and he'll never even know this. He'll never even be aware that it happened. Ach b'saro alav yichav. What does he feel? All he feels is the pain in his flesh. And we hear Eov, because remember, his skin was covered with these painful boils. That's all he knows. V'nafsho alav te'avol. And his soul, his spirit, or all of his hope that he has within him is just mourning what he hoped for, mourning what he wanted out of his life is gone. So this concludes Eov's speech, his speech to his friend. He's going to give more speeches we'll get to, and the friends are going to respond again in chapter 15. But this concludes this long speech that Eov is giving to his friends. And maybe he got through to them. We'll see. He didn't, but because they're just I don't know, quite stubborn. But we'll find out soon as we study Eliphaz's next answer, which we'll read about in chapter 15. But we feel the pain of Eov. We feel his desire for a relationship with God, his desire for understanding something, his understanding of his own humility, of his own lowliness before God and God's greatness. And the key thing, though, is his Eov trying to tell his friends and trying to teach us that to be humble before God also means understanding that we don't understand God's justice. We want to understand. We beg God for understanding. But this lack of understanding at this point in Eov's life is a source of pain. Because if I don't understand it, why am I going through this? when we do, as we go through the book, we'll understand that this is not always a source of pain, but we can move on from that pain by that lack of understanding and earn a sense of awe. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We have to go through Eob's emotions as he processes through this, and unfortunately suffers through this horrible, horrible suffering that he's going through. Thank you so much for studying chapter 14 with me. Looking forward to studying the rest of this book of Eov, and of course, the rest of many other books that we'll be studying together in the future. Have a wonderful day.